Hello, my name is Alaric Murphy. I'm an IT engineer living in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where the cold winds blow across Lake Minnetonka in winter, sharp enough to cut through skin, while summer is gentle with tree-lined streets and the cheerful chirping of birds. Minneapolis has a quiet beauty, not as noisy as big cities, but enough to make someone like me, who cherishes peace, feel at home. Home, a word that sounds so warm, but for me, it always carries a touch of luxury, like the flickering light at the end of a road I've never quite reached. I was born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, about a 6-hour drive from Minneapolis. Milwaukee is an industrial city with old streets steeped in my childhood memories, the smell of freshly baked bread from the corner bakery, the distant sound of ship horns from the harbor, and afternoons biking around the neighborhood with friends. My family lived there in an ordinary residential area. My parents, Martin and Elaine, and my younger brother, Grant. My father was a steel factory foreman, a stern, quiet man who took great pride in his family. My mother was a bank employee, sharp-witted, always knowing how to keep things running smoothly, from managing finances to organizing family gatherings. As for Grant, my brother, 2 years younger than me, he's now a businessman running a logistics company in Brookfield, a suburb of Milwaukee. He's always been the shining star in our parents' eyes, with a confident smile and a silver tongue that makes people love him. And me? I'm the forgotten child, a faint shadow in the family portrait. I don't talk much, don't like showing off, and perhaps because of that, I'm always pushed to the sidelines. My parents call Grant the one who'll make it big, while in their stories to relatives, I'm just the one who lives far away doing something with computers. Those words, seemingly harmless, cut like tiny knives each time they sink in. Not enough to bring me down, but enough to make me wonder, do I really belong to this family? I don't remember the last time I was invited home for a holiday. Every Christmas or Thanksgiving, I'm the one who texts first. Can I come home? The response is usually a long silence or a brief message. It's really busy this year, son. So I stay in Minneapolis in my small apartment, watching an old movie, eating frozen pizza, and telling myself I'm fine. But I'm not fine. Some nights I lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I did something wrong to be treated this way. I don't compete, don't vie with Grant for attention, don't demand anything. I just want to be seen, to be loved as a son. But it seems in my parents' eyes, I'm just a faint name in their contact list. The only person who truly cares about me is my grandmother, June. She lives about an hour's drive from my parents' house in a small wooden cabin on the outskirts of Milwaukee, where trees grow thickly and the air always carries a faint scent of pine. After my grandfather passed away 20 years ago, she's lived alone, but she never lets me feel lonely. Every week she calls, her voice warm like a hug over the phone. Alaric, are you doing okay? Are you eating enough? Don't work too hard, all right? Those calls are the only light in the days when I feel lost. She's my emotional anchor, the only person in the family who makes me feel valued. I still remember as a kid, every time we visited Grandma's house, Grant and I would run out to the garden to play while she sat on her rocking chair, telling stories about Grandpa, a carpenter with skilled hands. Grant would get bored and run off to find something else to do, but I was captivated. I'd sit by her for hours listening to her tales of the old days, about how Grandpa built that house from the first logs. Maybe that's why she and I have always been close. She understands me, my quiet nature, and never pressures me to be someone I'm not. But with my parents, things are different. Even when I was young, they gave Grant the attention I never had. Grant was the lively child, the one who could make them laugh, who knew how to tell stories that captured the whole family's focus. I, on the other hand, preferred sitting alone with a book or tinkering with computers. My father once said, half joking, half serious, Alaric, you're always up in the clouds. How are you going to do anything big like Grant? Those words, though casual, carved themselves deep into my heart. I wondered, am I not good enough, not worthy enough? As I grew older, the favoritism became even clearer. When Grant went to college, my parents covered everything, tuition, rent, all of it. Me? I paid my own way, working part-time at a coffee shop, taking out student loans and grinding day and night to graduate with a degree in engineering. I don't blame Grant. He's my brother, and I love him. But I can't help the pain of seeing my parents beam with pride over him while my efforts seem invisible. After graduating, I moved to Minneapolis, working as an IT engineer for a software company. The job is stable, the pay enough for me to live comfortably in my small apartment, with a desk full of technical books and a tiny cactus on the windowsill. I don't chase fame or show off. I just want to live true to myself, doing what I love. But every time I call home, I hear stories about Grant, about the logistics company he runs, his business trips, his grand plans. Even when Grant's first startup failed, my parents were there, pouring money into his new venture, calling it investing in the future. And me? I once sent money to help cover Mom's hospital bills after her surgery. Spent an entire summer fixing the roof for Dad. But I've never heard a thank you, or even a question about how I'm doing. What hurts most are the holidays. Every year I hope to be invited home, to sit with my family, to share a warm meal. But every year it's the same silence. The last time I went home was 3 years ago when I drove back for Dad's birthday. I carefully chose a gift, a watch, the kind he likes with a classic face and brown leather strap. I sent it to him hoping it would make him happy. But at the party, no one mentioned my gift. Instead, the family watched a slideshow Grant had prepared chronicling his success story. They laughed, clapped while I sat at the corner of the table quietly eating a piece of cake that tasted like nothing. I've started to wonder, am I really part of this family? Or am I just a passerby, a name on a guest list they forgot to send an invitation to? Some nights I sit in my apartment watching the city lights twinkle through the window, feeling an emptiness in my chest. I don't want to hold grudges, but the unfairness grows like a silent storm in my mind. I keep going, working, smiling, telling myself I don't need my parents' recognition. But deep down, I still long for the day they'll look at me, really look at me, and see that I'm more than the one who lives far away, doing something with computers. I still hope, though that hope is as fragile as a thread. Until one day, a week before Christmas, my phone buzzed and my father's name appeared on the screen. It was the first time in years that he had called me first. His voice over the phone sounded unfamiliar, but there was a hint of warmth. "Alaric, come home for Christmas this year, okay? The whole family misses you." I froze, my heart pounding. A mix of joy and doubt surged within me. I gripped the phone tightly, standing in my small Minneapolis apartment, where the Christmas lights from the buildings across the street flickered through the window, twinkling as if to remind me that the holiday season had arrived. But for me, Christmas had never been a time of complete joy. It was always a season of waiting for an invitation that never came, of sending messages that went unanswered. So this call, my father's voice, felt like a stone tossed into the calm lake of my heart, stirring ripples of both hope and fear. "Really, Dad?" I asked, my voice hoarse, as if I couldn't believe my own ears. "The whole family misses me?" "Yeah, Alaric," he replied, his voice hesitating for a moment before turning cheerful. "It's been so long since we've seen you. Your mom's been talking about you all the time. Come home for Christmas. Let's gather as a family and have some fun." Mom's been talking about me. I almost laughed, but not out of joy. Mom, who last called me 2 years ago to borrow money for hospital bills and never said thank you. I wanted to believe Dad, wanted to believe they truly missed me, but something in his tone made me uneasy. It was too sweet, too different from the stern, curt voice I'd known since childhood. But I didn't want to overthink it. I was tired of doubting my own family. Maybe just this once I wanted to let myself hope. "I'll try to make it work, Dad," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But the company has a strategic meeting on the 24th, so I might only get there late in the evening." No problem," he replied quickly, almost too eagerly. "As long as you can make it, Take your time, the roads are dangerous this time of year. I nodded, though I knew he couldn't see me, and hung up. The apartment fell silent again, with only the sound of the cold wind whistling through the window cracks. I sat down, staring at the phone, trying to process what had just happened. Dad called me. Dad invited me home. The family misses me. Those words echoed in my mind, but instead of bringing joy, they made me feel like I was walking on thin ice, unsure when it might crack. The following week, I was swamped with work. The company was preparing for a major project, and the strategic meeting on the 24th was the focal point. I buried myself in lines of code and data tables, trying not to think about Dad's call. But in my spare moments, I found myself opening my messages, rereading the text he sent after the call. "The whole family misses you." I wanted to believe it, but a part of me, the part used to being forgotten, whispered that something wasn't right. December 24th came faster than I expected. I woke up in my chilly apartment with the gray light of a Minnesota winter flooding through the window. Outside, snow began to fall, tiny flakes sparkling like shards of broken glass. I checked the weather forecast. A snowstorm was approaching, but not too severe. I told myself I'd be fine as long as I drove carefully. The meeting at work went smoothly, wrapping up earlier than expected. Instead of 4 p.m. as planned, we finished at noon. My boss patted my shoulder, smiling. "Alaric, have a great holiday. You did a fantastic job." I smiled back, but my mind was elsewhere. I could get to Milwaukee earlier. I could surprise my parents. The thought made my heart race. For years, I'd been the one waiting, the one asking if I could come home. This time, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to walk into the house, see their surprised faces, and know they truly missed me. I drove to a gift shop in downtown Minneapolis, where Christmas lights and the scent of cinnamon from cookie stands brought the holiday spirit to life. I picked out a dark green wool scarf for Mom. She loved green. I remembered that from childhood, when she'd wear a green coat every time she took me to the park. For Dad, I bought a small tool set. He liked fixing things around the house, even though he was older now and not as spry as before. For Grant, I chose a bottle of red wine, the kind he'd once mentioned liking during one of our rare conversations. I wrapped the gifts carefully, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. Would they like them? Would they this time truly see me? The drive from Minneapolis to Milwaukee takes about 6 hours, but with the approaching snowstorm, I knew it would take longer. I set out at 1 p.m., when the sky had turned a murky gray and the snowflakes grew thicker. The radio played Christmas songs, but I didn't sing along. I focused on the road ahead, on the headlights cutting through the white haze of snow. The further I drove, the heavier an invisible pressure grew in my chest. I wondered, why was I so nervous? This was my family, my home. But deep down, I knew why. I was afraid that, like so many times before, I'd be the odd one out in my own house. After more than 6 hours, as the clock neared 8 p.m., I finally reached Milwaukee. The snowstorm had slowed my journey, but I made it. My parents' house appeared under the dim glow of streetlights, with Christmas lights strung around the porch twinkling like in my childhood memories. I parked at the corner of the street, not wanting them to hear the car engine. I wanted to surprise them, to see their smiles when I walked in. I clutched the gift bag tightly, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the car. The freezing air stung my skin, but I didn't care. I just wanted to be home. Instead of going to the front door, I decided to circle around to the back, where the kitchen door was usually left unlocked. It was Mom's habit, despite my repeated warnings that it wasn't safe. I stepped lightly through the thick snow, hearing it crunch under my feet. As I neared the kitchen door, warm golden light spilled out from inside, along with the lively sound of conversation. I recognized Dad's voice, Mom's, and Grant's. They were laughing, talking animatedly. My heart beat faster. Were they waiting for me? Were they talking about me? I stopped at the door, my hand on the handle, but then I hesitated. Something in their voices made me pause. It wasn't joy, wasn't anticipation. It was tension. I leaned forward, peering through the frosted glass of the door, seeing the silhouettes of my parents and Grant sitting around the kitchen table. They didn't know I was there. I was about to knock, but then their words reached my ears, freezing me in place. "Transfer the car and the villa to Alaric's name first," my father said, his voice low but calculated. "If it's in his name, the court won't have any reason to seize it. We keep the assets safe, at least until the bankruptcy is settled." "Do it quickly," my mother nodded, her eyes fixed on a stack of papers on the table. Her voice was cold, without a hint of hesitation. "The investment account, too. Put it all in his name. Once the paperwork's sorted, we can take it back easily." Grant leaned forward, whispering, "But what if he doesn't agree? I mean, Alaric's not exactly naive. If he starts suspecting—" Mom cut him off with a dry, scoffing laugh. "Him? Suspect anything?" She glanced at Dad, a cold smile on her face. "He's the most obedient one in the family. His whole life he's just nodded and sacrificed. Don't worry, he'll sign." My blood felt like it stopped flowing. My head spun as if the world had collapsed beneath my feet. They were talking about transferring assets, the car, the investment account, even the vacation home I knew Grant had bought years ago, into my name. Not because they wanted to give me anything, but because Grant's company was on the brink of bankruptcy. They wanted to use me, my name, as a shield to protect Grant's assets from the court. And what hurt most was how they talked about me, like I was just a tool, something to be used, nothing more. "Just have him hold the title for a few months," Mom continued, her voice as casual as if she were discussing buying vegetables at the market. "After the bankruptcy is settled, we'll take it back. Alaric won't know a thing." Dad nodded. "Yeah, he never asks too many questions. Just say it's a Christmas gift and he'll sign the papers." I stood there in the biting cold of the winter night, my hands trembling as I gripped the gift bag. The gifts I'd chosen with all my love, all my hope, now felt meaningless. I wanted to burst in, scream, demand to know, why? Why would you do this to me? But I couldn't move. I just stood there, feeling my heart shatter into pieces. For 30 years, I'd done everything to make them see me. I'd sent money when Grant needed capital, paid Mom's hospital bills, spent an entire summer fixing Dad's roof. I tried to be kind, to be a good son, even when no one acknowledged it. But now I understood they never saw me. They only saw a tool, an obedient fool ready to do whatever they wanted. And worse, if I agreed to put my name on those assets, I'd be entangled in a legal scam. Transferring ownership to dodge debts is illegal. They weren't just using me. They didn't care that their actions could ruin my life. I turned around, walking away from the backyard, my feet heavy as lead. The gift bag was still in my hand, but I no longer wanted to bring it inside. I no longer wanted to surprise them, to see their fake smiles. I just wanted to leave, as far away as possible. Snow continued to fall, blanketing the road ahead, but the cold outside was nothing compared to the storm raging in my heart. I felt as if I'd been knocked down, as if the world I'd tried so hard to build, a world where I was still part of the family, had crumbled in just a few minutes. I got into the car and tossed the gift bag onto the back seat. The green wool scarf, the tool set, the bottle of red wine, all of it now felt meaningless, mere symbols of the foolish hope I'd clung to for years. In my mind, my parents' and Grant's words replayed like a broken tape. "He'll do anything if we ask. Alaric won't know a thing. Just have him hold the title for a few months." Each word was like a knife cutting deeper into a heart already scarred. I don't know how long I drove, only that I couldn't go back to Minneapolis right then. My small apartment, though I'd once called it home, now felt like an empty space, incapable of holding the pain swelling inside me. I needed a safe place, somewhere I could breathe without feeling suffocated. And in my mind, only one place came to mind: Grandma June's house, about an hour's drive away on the outskirts of Milwaukee. The road to Grandma's was a long, winding stretch through snow-covered fields and dark pine forests. The car's headlights illuminated the glistening snowflakes, but I had no mind to admire them. Everything inside me was in turmoil. I thought back to the times I'd tried to please my parents, to be seen by them. I remembered sending money to Grant when he needed capital for his first company. Money I'd saved from months of overtime at my IT job. I remembered the summer days I drove to Milwaukee, hunched over repairing Dad's roof in the sweltering heat while he sat inside watching football. I remembered when Mom had surgery, how I transferred money to cover her hospital bills without being asked, simply because I thought it was what a son should do. But now I realized everything I'd done, all the kindness I'd shown, was just paving the way for the betrayal tonight. In the stillness of Christmas Eve, memories flooded back, sharp and painful. The road to Grandma's seemed longer than usual, perhaps because my mind was being torn apart by a mix of emotions: anger, pain, disappointment, and a touch of self-blame. Why did I let myself hope? Why did I think this time would be different? I wondered if I'd been too weak, too naive, believing that if I was kind enough, tried hard enough, my parents would see me differently. But now I understood. They never saw me. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because they didn't want to. As I drove down the narrow road leading to Grandma's neighborhood, memories of her came rushing back, like a soothing balm amidst the storm in my heart. I remembered 10 years ago when Grant went to college. My parents had proudly announced they'd cover all his tuition and living expenses, while I, at the time, had to scrape by to graduate. Grandma was furious. I still remember her standing in my parents' kitchen, her voice trembling with indignation. Why do you treat your two sons so differently? What has Alaric done to deserve being left behind like this? Dad just shook his head, saying she was making a big deal out of it, while Mom told her she didn't understand. After that, Grandma nearly cut off contact with my parents. She stopped visiting their house even when invited. She told me in a voice both sad and resolute, "Alaric, I can't stand watching my son treat you like this. If they can't see your worth, I will." Those words, though years old, remained the only light in my darkness. Grandma was the only person in the family who made me feel valued, who made me feel I didn't have to try to be someone else just to be loved. And now, when the world seemed to have turned its back on me, she was the only one I wanted to turn to. The wooden cabin of my grandmother appeared in the glow of the headlights, small but warm amidst the blanket of snow. I parked in the front yard, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment, taking deep breaths to calm myself. I didn't want to walk into her house with tears streaming down my face or a trembling voice. She had worried about me enough already. But as I opened the car door, the cold of the winter night rushed in, and I realized I couldn't hide my emotions anymore. I just wanted to hug her, to hear her say that everything would be okay. I stepped onto the porch, my boots crunching on the thick snow. The Milwaukee winter night was freezing, but the golden light from Grandma's window was like an invitation, pulling me out of the darkness enveloping me. I knocked softly, afraid of startling her in the middle of the night. Slow footsteps echoed, and when the door opened, there stood Grandma June, in a thick gray sweater and worn-out fuzzy slippers. Her silver hair was loosely tied back, her eyes lighting up when she saw me, but they quickly shifted to concern. She didn't say anything, just opened the door wider and held out her arms. I stepped forward, and before I could think, I hugged her tightly, letting silent tears fall onto her shoulder. "Alaric," she whispered, her voice warm but tinged with worry. "What are you doing here in the middle of the night? What's wrong?" I didn't answer right away. I just stood there in her embrace, feeling the warmth of the woman who had always been the beacon in my darkest days. Finally, I let go and sat down in the old armchair in the living room. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, casting a gentle orange glow that reminded me of childhood Christmas evenings when Grandma and I would sit here, baking cookies and listening to her stories about Grandpa. The scent of pine and smoke lingered in the air like a balm, soothing the pain tearing at my heart. Grandma didn't press for answers. She walked to the kitchen and brought out a steaming bowl of tomato soup, placing it in front of me. "Eat, dear," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "It's cold out there. You need something warm in your stomach." I looked at the soup, steam rising from it, and suddenly felt a gnawing hunger. Not just for food, but for the care and attention I'd been starved of for years. I picked up the spoon and took a sip, the tangy sweet tomato blending with the creamy richness, like a vivid memory of my childhood when Grandma was always in the kitchen cooking dishes that just by their smell made me feel safe. "Thank you, Grandma," I said, my voice hoarse. I don't know where to start." She sat down in the chair across from me, her thin hands clasped together, her eyes watching me, not judging, not pushing, just quietly waiting. I took a deep breath, and then, like a dam breaking, I told her everything. I told her about Dad's unexpected call, about the naive hope that drove me to travel 6 hours through a snowstorm to get home. I told her about the gifts I'd carefully chosen, about the moment I stood outside the kitchen door and overheard my parents and Grant, words that shattered my heart. I told her about the pain of realizing that for 30 years I'd never truly been a son in their eyes, only a tool to be used when needed. When I finished, the living room fell silent. Only the crackling fire and the howling wind outside the window remained. Grandma looked at me, her eyes filled with sadness but not surprise. She sighed, a heavy breath, as if she'd been carrying this pain for a long time, waiting for the day I'd see it too. "You've done everything for them," she finally said, her voice low but steady. "You've given too much, Alaric, and they've taken too much." I nodded, feeling tears well up again. I thought, if I was kind enough, if I tried hard enough, they'd see me. But I was wrong, Grandma. They never saw me. She reached out and took my hand, her trembling but warm grasp steadying me. "You weren't wrong," she said. "You weren't wrong to love, to hope. But you need to learn to protect yourself. They don't deserve your kindness." Her words were like a knife, not because they hurt, but because they were so true. I'd spent my life trying to please my parents, to prove I was worthy of their love. I'd given without asking, sacrificed without complaint. But now I saw my kindness in their eyes was just something to exploit. "I tried to stop it," she continued, her gaze drifting to the fire as if searching for old memories. "From the time you were little, I saw how they treated you and Grant differently. I told your father, your mother, that they couldn't favor one child like that, but they didn't listen. They said I was making a big deal out of it, that I didn't understand. I'm sorry I couldn't do more for you." I shook my head, tears spilling again. "Don't say that. You've always been there for me. If it weren't for you, I don't know what I'd have become." She smiled, a sad but warm smile. "You don't need their validation," she said, her voice firmer than ever. "You need to be free. You can't spend your life waiting for them to see your worth. You have to see it yourself." Her words were like a ray of light piercing the fog in my mind. Free. All my life, I'd lived with the idea that I had to prove my worth, that if I tried hard enough, my parents would love me like they loved Grant. But now I realized I didn't need their validation to feel worthy. I didn't need to keep chasing a love they were never willing to give. I sat there in Grandma's small house, and for the first time that night I felt a hint of relief. The pain was still there, but it was no longer a raging storm. It was like a wave still rising, but no longer strong enough to drown me. Grandma stood up, brought over an old wool blanket and draped it over my shoulders. "Rest, my dear," she said. "Tomorrow is a new day, and you'll find a way to move forward." I nodded, but in my mind questions swirled. What would I do when I faced my parents? Should I walk into their house tomorrow, pretending I hadn't heard their words? Or should I return to Minneapolis, shutting the door on the past? I had no answers, but for the first time I felt I had the power to choose, to decide my own fate instead of letting others dictate it. My phone buzzed on the table, a text from Mom. Alaric, where are you? Why haven't you come home? The whole family's waiting. I stared at the screen, feeling my heart tighten again. The whole family's waiting? Or were they waiting to pull me into the trap they'd set? I put the phone down without replying. That night, I slept on the couch in the living room, lulled by the crackling fire and the warmth of Grandma's wool blanket. I dreamed of childhood days, making Christmas cookies with her when the world seemed simpler, and I still believed family was where I belonged. But the dream faded quickly and I woke to the dim light of Christmas morning. I stayed at Grandma's all day. We didn't talk much, but her presence was enough to make me feel safe. She made a simple breakfast, toast and fried eggs, and we ate in silence, occasionally exchanging a few words about trivial things, the weather, her garden, or the stray cat she fed. But that simplicity, her quiet care, helped me begin to mend the wounds in my heart. In the afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Dad. I stared at his name on the screen, my finger hesitating over the answer button. Finally, I picked up, my voice colder than I intended. "I'm busy, Dad. I'll come by later." He hesitated, then said, "All right, that's fine, but come soon, okay? Your mom's prepared a big feast." I hung up without saying more. A big feast? I no longer believed their words, but I knew I had to face them. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed closure. Not for them, but for myself. Sitting in Grandma's kitchen, a cold cup of coffee in my hand, I looked out the window. The snow had stopped falling, leaving a smooth white layer over her small garden. The faint light of the Christmas afternoon filtered through the pine branches, casting shimmering shadows on the ground. But in my heart there was no shimmer. Only a resolve growing stronger, harder, and clearer than ever before. I would not let myself be used again. Not one more time. Grandma sat across from me, quietly watching. She didn't ask questions or push, but her eyes seemed to say she believed I'd find a way. I gave her a faint smile, trying to hide the storm of emotions swirling inside. "I'm going to Mom and Dad's this afternoon," I said, my voice low but firm. "I need to clear things up." She nodded, placing her hand on mine. "You're stronger than you think, Alaric," she said. "Remember that." Her words were like a small flame, enough to warm my heart before I stepped into a battle I knew wouldn't be easy. I stood up, gathered a few things, and prepared to leave. Before stepping out, I hugged her again, feeling the warmth of her embrace, the one thing in this family that had never let me down. "Thank you, Grandma," I whispered. "I'll be okay." The drive to my parents' house felt shorter than yesterday, perhaps because my mind was no longer torn by hope or doubt. I knew the truth now, and all I wanted was to face it. As I parked in front of the house, the Christmas lights still twinkled on the porch, but they no longer warmed me. This house, the one I'd once called home, was now just a facade, hiding the lies and selfishness I'd overheard last night. I stepped onto the porch, took a deep breath, and knocked. Footsteps sounded, and Mom opened the door, her smile bright but somehow forced. "Alaric, you're here," she said, her voice sugary as if nothing had happened. "Come in. Everyone's waiting for you." I nodded and stepped inside, but I didn't smile. In the living room, Dad was sitting in an armchair holding a glass of wine, while Grant stood near the fireplace, phone in hand. They both looked at me, and I could feel the tension in the air, though they tried to mask it with smiles and greetings. "You made it," Dad said, standing to clap me on the shoulder. "Sit down. Your mom's prepared a big feast. It's Christmas. We've got to gather together." I sat, but not because I wanted to join in the family cheer. I sat to observe, to stay calm, and to prepare for what was coming. Dinner was laid out on the table. Roast turkey, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie, all picture perfect, like an ideal Christmas scene. But I felt no warmth. I only noticed the furtive glances between my parents and Grant, the subtle looks they thought I wouldn't catch. "You must be tired from the long drive," Mom said, placing a slice of turkey on my plate. "Eat, dear. I spent all morning making this." "Thank you, Mom," I said, but I didn't touch my fork. I looked around the table and saw Grant fidgeting as if waiting for something. And I knew that moment was coming. After a few minutes of small talk, Dad cleared his throat, set down his wine glass, and looked at me with a serious expression. "Alaric, there's something your mom and I want to discuss with you," he began, his voice slow as if choosing each word carefully. "The family's got some financial plans and we think you can help." My heart pounded, but I kept my face neutral. "Help how?" I asked, my voice steady. Mom jumped in, her smile still sweet but her eyes betraying tension. "It's just a small thing. We want to transfer some assets to your name. A car, an investment account, and the vacation home by Lake Geneva. Think of it as a Christmas gift for you." I almost laughed, but not out of joy. A Christmas gift? Did they really think I was foolish enough to believe that lie? I looked at Grant, who lowered his head, avoiding my gaze. I looked at Dad, who was trying to maintain his calm demeanor, and I looked at Mom, whose smile was starting to falter. I took the stack of papers she slid toward me, pretending to read them carefully. The dense legal text didn't matter. I already knew what they were. Contracts to transfer assets, drafted to make me a shield to protect Grant from his debts. I flipped through the pages slowly, drawing out the moment, letting them feel the awkwardness they'd created. "I'll need to have my lawyer look at these first," I said finally, my voice cold. "Assets this big, I can't just sign without checking." The room seemed to freeze. Grant's head snapped up, his eyes wide, a flicker of panic crossing his face. "A lawyer?" he said, his voice slightly high-pitched. "It's just family business, Alaric. Why do you need a lawyer?" Dad chimed in. "Alaric, don't make a big deal out of it. We're just trying to help you, to give you a share of the family's assets." I couldn't hold back anymore. The anger, pain, and disappointment that had built up over years exploded. I set the papers down on the table, harder than I meant to, making Mom's wine glass tremble. "Help me?" I said, my voice shaking, but not from fear. "Or help Grant dodge his debts? I heard everything, Dad, Mom, Grant, last night at the kitchen door. I heard you planning to use me to shield Grant's bankrupt company." All three of them froze. Mom's face went pale and Dad stiffened, his wine glass halting mid-air. Grant opened his mouth to say something, but I raised my hand to stop him. "Don't," I said, my voice sharp as a blade. "Don't try to justify it. For 30 years, I've done everything to be seen by you. I sent money when Grant needed it, paid Mom's hospital bills, fixed Dad's roof. I've tried to be a good son, a good brother. But you never saw me. You only saw a tool, a fool ready to do whatever you wanted." "Alaric, what are you talking about?" Mom tried to interject, her voice breaking. "I've always loved you." "Love?" I gave a hollow laugh, feeling my heart shatter. "Love when you never once invited me home for holidays? Love when you call me the one who does something with computers? Love when you're ready to throw me in jail to save Grant? Don't talk about love, Mom. I'm done." Grant shot to his feet, his face red. "You're going too far, Alaric. Who do you think you are, judging the whole family? You're always like this, always playing the victim." I looked at him, my brother, the one I'd once loved and protected. But now he was a stranger. "Grant," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I'm not judging, I'm just telling the truth. And the truth is, I'm done playing this game." I stood, pushing my chair back. "I'm done," I said, looking at my parents. "I'm not signing anything, and I'm not coming back here." Mom burst into tears, but I wasn't sure if they were real or just another act to keep me there. Dad called my name, his voice angry but helpless. "Alaric, sit down. We can talk about this." "There's nothing left to say," I replied, walking to the door. "I've said everything I needed to." I left the house without looking back. Mom's calls, Grant's shouting, everything faded behind me. As I got into the car, my hands were still trembling, but not from pain anymore. It was relief, as if I'd just shed a weight that had been crushing my shoulders for 30 years. The next day, I began cutting all ties with my family. I went to the bank and closed every joint account I'd kept open for my parents to use in emergencies. I canceled every authorization I'd ever signed, Things I'd thought were to help the family, but now knew were just tools for them to exploit me. I blocked my parents' and Grant's phone numbers. Each click, each signature was a step toward reclaiming my freedom. As I drove away from Milwaukee heading back to Minneapolis, I felt an emptiness, but it wasn't pain. It was the emptiness of someone who had just torn down an old wall, leaving behind the debris of the past. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time I felt I had the power to shape it. The road back to Minneapolis stretched out before me, covered in a thin layer of snow that glistened under the headlights. The cold wind whistled through the car's window cracks, but I didn't feel cold. Inside me, a small flame was burning, not bright or fierce, but gentle, like the glow from the fireplace in Grandma's house. It was the flame of freedom, of someone who had just stepped out of the shadow of the past to start anew. When I returned to my apartment in Minneapolis, the city was steeped in the quiet aftermath of Christmas. Twinkling lights still adorned the streets, but they no longer made me feel out of place. I stepped inside, placed my keys on the table, and looked around. The small room with the cactus on the windowsill, the bookshelf filled with technical manuals, and the worn armchair, all of it suddenly felt dearer. This was my home, a place where I could be myself without needing to prove anything to anyone. In the days that followed, I began to change. Not grand, sweeping changes, but small, steady steps to rebuild my life. I quit my job at the IT company where I'd poured in years but always felt like just a cog in the machine. Instead, I started freelancing, taking on remote programming projects. The new work gave me flexibility, but more importantly, it gave me a sense of freedom. Freedom to work on my own terms, to live at my own rhythm. I also began taking better care of myself. I bought a few small potted plants and placed them on the windowsill next to the cactus. I learned how to water them, watched their tiny new leaves sprout, and found a simple joy in seeing them grow day by day. One afternoon, while passing by an animal shelter, I decided to adopt a dog, a golden-furred mutt with warm brown eyes and a tail that wagged furiously every time I walked through the door. I named him Finn, and he became my companion, joining me on walks around Lake Minnetonka and sitting by my side on the armchair during winter evenings as snow fell outside the window. But the biggest change wasn't the job or the plants. It was how I saw myself. One evening, with Finn curled up beside me, I opened my laptop and started writing. I didn't know what I was writing, only that I needed to pour my thoughts out of my head. I wrote about my family, about the years I spent trying to be loved, about the pain of realizing they never truly saw me. I wrote about Grandma June, about the steaming bowls of soup she made, about the words she spoke that helped me stand back up. And I wrote about my journey of breaking free from the shadow of the past, about learning that my worth didn't depend on others' validation. Those words became a blog post, and I uploaded it to a personal website I'd created just to experiment. I didn't expect anyone to read it, but a few days later I received a comment from a stranger. "Thank you for sharing. I've also felt like I wasn't good enough in my family. Your story made me feel less alone." Then another comment, and another. I was surprised to realize that the words I wrote, the pain I thought only I understood, resonated with the hearts of strangers. I kept writing, not because I wanted fame, but because I discovered that sharing my story was a way to heal, not just for me, but for others too. Sometimes I think about my parents and Grant. I didn't block their numbers forever. A small part of me still holds a faint hope that one day they might change. But I don't wait for it anymore. I don't let my life depend on them. Occasionally, Mom sends a text. "Alaric, are you okay? I miss you." I read them but don't reply. Not because I'm angry, but because I need time to protect myself. Maybe one day I'll be ready to talk again, but not now. Spring arrived in Minneapolis with gentle rain and green buds sprouting on the trees along Lake Minnetonka. I spent more time walking with Finn, my golden-furred dog, feeling the cool raindrops on my face and listening to the soft lapping of waves against the shore. My life now was simple but fulfilling. Freelance projects kept me busy. The potted plants on my windowsill brought small joys, and the blog posts I wrote continued to resonate with strangers. I no longer felt the need to prove anything. Being myself was enough. But the past, though I'd tried to leave it behind, occasionally knocked at my door. One late March afternoon, as I sat in my apartment checking work emails, my phone buzzed. It wasn't a text, but a call from Grandma June. I answered immediately, a smile spreading across my face at the sound of her voice. "Alaric, are you doing okay?" she asked, her tone as warm as ever. "I just made a batch of ginger cookies. When are you coming to visit?" "Soon, Grandma," I replied, a warmth spreading through me. "Finn probably misses your garden by now." She chuckled softly, but then her voice grew more serious. "Alaric, I have something to tell you about Grant and your parents." My heart skipped a beat. I tried not to think about them, but Grant's name brought back the memories of last Christmas Eve. The cold words in the kitchen, the plan to use me, and the moment I walked away from that house for good. "What is it, Grandma?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She sighed over the phone, a heavy sound I rarely heard from her. "Grant's company went bankrupt, Alaric. The court ordered the seizure of all assets in his name. The luxury car, the investment account, even the vacation home by Lake Geneva. Everything's been taken to pay off his debts." I sat there, gripping the phone, unsure of what to feel. Part of me wasn't surprised. I'd overheard them discussing Grant's massive debts that night. But another smaller part felt a pang of sadness. After all, Grant was still my brother, the one I'd played with, shared childhood summers with. But that feeling quickly faded as I recalled how he looked at me that Christmas Eve, how he was willing to let me be the sacrificial lamb for his mistakes. "Your father called me a few days ago," Grandma continued. "He told me everything. Grant's nearly broke now. He had to sell his apartment in Brookfield to cover debts. Your parents, they're struggling too. The house in Milwaukee was mortgaged to funnel money to Grant before, and now they're worried they'll lose it." I stayed silent, letting her words sink in. Part of me wanted to ask if they deserved these consequences, but I held back. Instead, I asked, "Did they say anything about me?" Grandma hesitated, and I knew she was choosing her words carefully. "Your mother mentioned you. She said she regrets it, Alaric. She said she and your father want to see you, to apologize." I let out a bitter laugh, not out of joy. Regret? Now, when everything had fallen apart, when they had nothing left to gain from me, they regretted it? "What do you think I should do?" I asked, though I already knew the answer in my heart. "You need to do what's right for you," she said, her voice firm. "I'm not saying you have to forgive or go back. I just want you to do what brings you peace." I nodded, though she couldn't see. "Thank you, Grandma," I said. "I'll think about it." After the call, I sat there, staring out the window where raindrops streaked down the glass. Finn lifted his head from his spot on the floor as if sensing my mood and nudged my hand with his nose. I petted him, finding comfort in the gentle touch. But in my mind, thoughts of my parents and Grant swirled. They regretted it? Or were they just looking for another way out, someone to cling to now that everything had collapsed? A few days later, a letter arrived at my apartment. The envelope bore my mother's handwriting, neat and familiar from childhood, when she'd leave notes in my lunchbox. I held the letter, my fingers tracing the edges, but didn't open it right away. I left it on the table like an unanswered question and went back to my work. But every time I passed by, I glanced at it, a mix of curiosity and apprehension stirring within me. Finally, on a rainy evening with Finn asleep by the electric fireplace, I sat down and opened the letter. My mother's words appeared, written in blue ink, trembling in places as if penned through tears. "Alaric, I know you don't want to hear from me, and I don't blame you. What your father and I did, what we said that Christmas Eve, is unforgivable. I don't know how to make it right, but I want you to know I regret it. We were wrong not to see your worth, to make you feel unimportant. Your father and I want to see you, to apologize in person. If you're willing, we can start over. I love you, Alaric. I always have. even if I didn't show it the right way. I read the letter over and over, feeling my heart tighten. Part of me wanted to believe she meant it, that she truly regretted it. But another part, the one that had been hurt too many times, whispered that this might just be another attempt to pull me back. Not out of love, but out of desperation. I folded the letter, tucked it into a drawer, and didn't respond. A few weeks later, my father called. I stared at his name on the phone screen, my finger hovering over the answer button. Finally, I picked up but said nothing, letting him speak first. "Alaric?" His voice was hoarse, lacking the sternness I'd always known. "I know you don't want to talk to me, but I want to apologize. We were wrong. So wrong. I don't expect you to forgive us right away, but I want you to know." I stayed silent, letting him continue. He talked about Grant's situation, the company's bankruptcy, the seized assets, and how Grant was now working for a smaller company to make ends meet. He talked about the house in Milwaukee, how they were struggling to keep it by paying off the mortgage bit by bit. And he talked about Mom, how she cried whenever she mentioned me. "We want to see you," he said, "even just once so we can apologize in person." I took a deep breath, feeling a wave of emotions rise but not letting it overwhelm me. "Dad," I said, my voice calm but resolute, "I know you're trying, but I'm not ready. I need time." He hesitated, then said, "I understand. We'll wait, Alaric. Whenever you're ready, we'll be here." I hung up, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't ready to open my heart either. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I needed to protect myself. The wounds they'd left couldn't heal with just a letter or a phone call. They needed time, and I needed space to keep living my life. Summer arrived, and I received an invitation from Grandma to come to Milwaukee for her birthday. I drove back, bringing Finn and a box of homemade ginger cookies. As I stepped into her familiar wooden cabin, I saw her in the garden, watering the flower pots she'd tended her whole life. She smiled when she saw me, and I hugged her, feeling the peace only she could bring. Over dinner, she mentioned that my parents had visited her recently, bringing a small gift to apologize for the years of distance. "They're trying, Alaric," she said, "but I'm not pushing you to do anything. You know what's best for you." I nodded, looking out at the garden where Finn was scampering around. "I know, Grandma," I said. "I'm not ready yet, but I'm not closing the door completely. Maybe one day I'll meet them. But for now, I just want to be here, with you." She smiled, placing her hand on mine. "That's enough, my dear." I returned to Minneapolis, continuing my life, writing my blog, tending my plants, walking with Finn. I no longer waited for my parents or Grant to change, but I left a small crack open in my heart, not for them, but for myself. So I could forgive when I was ready, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Winter came again, and with the Christmas spirit filling the air, I decided to drive to Grandma's house in Milwaukee for the holiday. Finn sat in the passenger seat, his golden-furred head poking out the window, making me laugh as he tried to catch snowflakes with his tongue. When I arrived, Grandma was standing on the porch as if she knew I was coming. She wore the green sweater I'd once given her, her silver hair neatly tied back, and her smile shone brighter than the Christmas lights strung around the house. "Alaric," she called, her voice warm. "You're just in time. I just finished baking." I hugged her, feeling the familiar warmth, and for the first time in years, Christmas didn't feel like a source of sadness. We stepped inside, Finn bounding around the small garden, chasing snowflakes. Grandma set the table with ginger cookies, tomato soup, and a bottle of wine she said was saved for a special occasion. We sat by the fireplace, talking about simple things: her garden, my freelance projects, and walks with Finn. There was no pretense, no expectations, just the presence of two people who truly cared for each other. As night fell, I stood on the porch watching the snow fall silently on the pine branches. Finn lay at my feet, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. I thought about the years gone by, about the times I waited for love from people who were never willing to give it. I used to think love had to be reciprocated, that my worth depended on how others saw me. But now I understood. True love begins when I stop letting others define my value. I went back inside, seeing Grandma place a fresh plate of cookies on the table. "Have some more," she said, her eyes twinkling. "It's Christmas, we've got to celebrate." I smiled, sat down, and took a ginger cookie. The sweetness of honey and the slight spice of ginger spread through my mouth, a reminder that life, despite its wounds, still held moments of sweetness. I looked at Grandma, at Finn snoring softly by the fireplace, and I knew I'd found home. Not a place, but a feeling, a state of peace. A year ago, I'd left Milwaukee with a broken heart, but now I had come back to life, not as the forgotten son, but as Alaric, a man who knew how to love himself, who valued what truly mattered. And as the snow continued to fall outside the window, I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and let myself sink into the quiet of a Christmas no longer tinged with sorrow.